All right, the real quick and dirty. It's 05 Ducati Monster SR4. This is a 996cc engine. The reason why I bought this bike is specifically for this engine. I've been chasing this engine for a while. I could find them without the throttle bodies on them. I could find them with the throttle bodies, but I couldn't find the wiring harness, ECU, everything contained in one. Well, this bike came, I actually found it on Marketplace when I was in Italy and kind of saved it and thought, well, if it's there when I get back, that's fine. But if it's not, no big loss. And when I got back, I contacted the guy. He said, yes, it's still for sale. And I offered him about half of what he wanted, a third of what he wanted. And he said, sold. He said, come pick it up. And that was that. So I drove about 2.5, 3 hours to go get it. And she's crusty, but it is all there. Everything is there. There's no parts missing. There's some rough stuff on it, but that comes with the price. The fuel tank, it's got some dents in it here. It's got some dents here. It's got a dent on the other side. It's pretty rusty here where water's been dripping down on it. It's got some kind of screw there, off screw. I haven't got it open yet, but I gotta let it soak and see if I can get it open. Usually they open with the ignition key. At least mine does. The ignition key usually works on all the locks on this bike. No front brakes. Of course, this thing is set for at least 5 years, so the clutch is kind of there, but it's moving the clutch a little bit, so that may be just, I can bleed it, put a little fluid in and get it to work. Other than that, everything looks to be complete. Twin fan radiator, which is really nice. That's kind of one of the things with the 748 stuff like that. A lot of guys would upgrade to the twin fan because they do run a little bit warm. Did check the antifreeze. The antifreeze was good and it was full. So that means at least it didn't freeze and crack the block and it had the proper amount of antifreeze in it. Like it wasn't ran low. March of Seasoney, Ford's magnesium wheels. They're in great shape. It does have the snowflake rotors. For mine, it took me at least a couple of months to find these particular rotors for mine. So they're hard to find, pretty expensive. These are in very good shape. There's nothing wrong with them at all. There's no pitting, no grooves in them. They're not glazed over. The calipers, that little bolt right there has a little bit of rust on it. It's nothing too complicated to clean up, but those are in good shape as well. The brake pads look good. It does have a set of Öhlins front shocks, and it does have nitrate coating on the bottom of those. I really like that. It does have a few little dents and dings in there, but it's all in pretty decent shape. Carbon fiber front fender. Gauge cluster, great shape. I did put a battery in it real quick because they had some like a lawnmower battery in it, which would be fine, but it was dead and it's been dead for a long time, so I couldn't get it charged. So I kind of swapped a battery instead of taking it out of mine that I had laying out, and the gauges did come up, lights came on. It did kind of slightly crank over, but I didn't want to push it too much. I want to check everything over before I really try to crank it and see if it'll run. Headlights in good condition. The front faring's got a little bit of scarring on it. Turn signal on the left side. Ooh. Left side over there has a little bit of scarring as well, but it's not bad. It does have the frame sliders on it. There's a little bit of rust coming from the tank down to here. It's all cosmetic. Someone did put silicone aftermarket hoses on it, and they eliminated the junction block, which is a big thing that a lot of guys do. I haven't did it on mine, but all of these parts not only will go with this engine, but you can pull these parts off and put it on my engine as well, because it's 748, 916, 996 are all identical as far as externals. If they're setting out on the engine stand, you couldn't tell the difference, So all these parts would change over to my engine. It does have an aftermarket slave cylinder for the clutch, which is nice. Shifter's bent. I've got another one. It's not a big deal. I could bend that one back with a little bit of heat, put it in the vise just to get it to shift. Rear swing arm looks nice. It's a lot different from mine. This is kind of a tubular style, but it is in good condition. Rear shock looks fine. And it has a set of Trimagale carbon fiber exhaust. Now, this is an aftermarket set, of course, with it being like that, but it also reroutes how they set, because originally both pipes would be on this side, stacked on top of each other. Well, this reroutes them to side by side. I really like that as well. They're kind of a mid-pipe setup. It's not a full exhaust system because you bolt it in here, and it's a larger radius here to there. Like on my bike, they're this size all the way through to the cylinder heads. Clutch cover is cracked. That's not a big deal either. You can take this off and run it without that. So if it looks like it's going to be binding into that, I'll probably just break it loose there, because my parts will bolt onto this. Like I said, the reason why I bought this bike is particularly for the engine. All the parts, all the modifications I've done to my engine can be put onto this. My clutch setup, my everything that I've done. So it's not a big deal there. And I gain, because mine doesn't have an oil cooler. And I was gonna get one because it's hard to find these in good condition and not pay $500 for one with both pipe setup, and then on the filter side, underneath the filter where the screw is for the center, where the center of the filter screws in, there's also a little tab there that you got to get right. So there's all these little things that are a plus on this bike. But before I fire it off, I'm going to drain the oil, check it, and then I'm going to pull a screen out of it, check the screen to make sure there's no metal in there. See how that all kind of looks. I'm going to pull the covers off of the timing belts, pull the plugs out of it, put a little fogging oil down in the cylinders, and then turn it over by hand and check the timing, check the conditions of the belt. I'm gonna see if the belts are tuned properly at 110 hertz, the frequency, with a guitar tuner, make sure all that's fine. The injection system probably have to be gone through because it's pretty rusty. The fuel line going in, the feed line is pretty rusty, so those have to be taken out and soaked. And I'll probably have to set up a trigger on them and trigger the injectors to pump stuff through and to make sure they're okay. But other than that, everything seems to be here. The ECU, I thought was under the seat. It's up under here. It's kind of tucked up under the side. So when I do swap this, it'll be a direct bolt in, but all the wiring and everything that's associated with that will have to go into my 748 because the ECU is different, which won't be too bad, but I will have to change like the ignition barrel probably if it doesn't bolt up the same. There'll probably be a little bit of work with the wiring from my gauges to this wiring harness. But all in all, I don't think it'll be too bad. There's a lot of parts I can sell off this, like the exhaust system I'm not gonna use. The fuel tank, I mean, it's got a little bit of damage, but it's worth something. The seat's in decent condition. There's no problems with it. The paint looks good. You clean it up and this thing will clean up really nice. The carbon fiber bits look nice. And like the frame sliders, there's all these things I can sell. So basically the plan is to sell all the parts to make my money back, basically break even, make a little bit, and keep all the rest of the parts for this bike. That way I'll have another engine. We'll go from a 748 to a 996, and hopefully I'll have another set of wheels, another set of rotors, possibly I possibly want those forks. I could swap out those forks with mine, sell my forks, and just the little bits like that, because all of that is very expensive if you buy it piece by piece by piece. I could barely buy the set of wheels for what I paid for this bike, so that's a huge difference to me, and I got the whole bike. And I think that radiator will fit mine, and if it will, I'll probably put it in there as well because it is a twin fan, and that's a lot. It runs a lot cooler that way, especially in traffic and stuff like that, or if you're doing track days. But not a bad bike. It's just now comes the hard part of going through the whole system, and since it's set for so long, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. Hopefully the fuel pump isn't shot. I'm thinking if it is, I can take my tank off of mine, put it on a workbench, plumb it in, and if the wiring will match, I can get it to work. I think I could power it through a 12-volt system anyway, but that would power up the injectors just to see if they fire, everything hits, and I can get it to run. That way, I know that part's good, and then when I put it in my bike, everything could be fine there. So just kind of I said a quick rundown, but it's almost been 10 minutes, but there she is.